kids are outside playing, so while I'm folding laundry, I promised a couple of you guys I would actually explain Chase. Well, boy child, aka the Chase. Chase was a completely normal pregnancy. Everything went completely normal. He was born at 40 weeks, which is normal. Every ultrasound, there was absolutely nothing wrong. According to the OB and the midwife, everything was perfect. My water broke probably about 4 in the morning, and we went to the hospital, you know, like everybody else does, and had a baby. He was actually born at 9:30 in the morning. The midwife made the strange comment of, I'm going to wait to clamp his cord because this is weirdly long. And I'm not kidding. It was long. It was beyond long in any kind of perspective, because he was able to sit all the way up on my chest, and I mean all the way up on my chest. And she still had enough cord. It was as long as her arm. Seriously. So she decided to wait to clamp the cord and do delayed cord cutting, and she waited probably about 10 minutes before she finally talked my ex-husband into cutting the cord. He did not want to do that. Pretty much instantly, he started turning purple and went from crying to gasping. I knew something was wrong. This is not my first rodeo. Granted, with the first one, I was knocked out for the majority of it. But I knew something was wrong. You call it whatever you want. Moms, it was obvious. Babies don't turn purple. So, you know, he wasn't having too much of a problem. So at this point, they had already quickly weighed him, quickly measured him, stuck him back on my chest, took the oxygen mask off of me and put it on him. They've already called the NICU. NICU was coming. NICU brought a BiPAP machine. They stuck him on it. It wasn't working. Yeah. It's kind of hard to tell this story. But it's okay. Because he's okay. But, they put him on the BiPAP. He still wasn't getting oxygen. So, there is nothing scarier than watching the head of NICU snatch your kid up out of the bassinet and run down the hallway with them. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what these people are doing. And you honestly don't know if you're going to see your kid again. But everything's okay. He's here. He's fine. My midwife and the nurse kept being insistent everything was okay. Just sometimes little boys need a little bit of extra help. In my gut, I knew this wasn't true and that they were just trying to keep him calm. So, my mom leaves, my dad leaves. They go to get some lunch. Well, dinner at this point. We're still under the presumption he's fine. He just needs a little help. Because I'm not getting updates. The husband at the time goes to take a shower, and they do everything else to me. You know, typical, just had a baby stuff. And, the nurse and my midwife come back in. And the nurse grabs my hand. And the midwife grabs my leg. And she says, we need to talk. You know, like, what everybody wants to hear from your doctor after you just had a baby that was rushed out of the room. I said, hey, Marshmallow. They told me, I'm okay, buddy. That I needed to be prepared to say goodbye. Because they didn't know what was wrong with him, and they were running all kinds of tests and could not figure out why he was taking breaths but wasn't oxygenating his blood. According to everything they were doing, EKGs were normal, X-rays were normal, CTs were normal. Everything was normal. By every exception, this little boy was normal. But for whatever reason, every breath he took wasn't oxygenating his blood. So every minute, we were losing him. They had already called Duke Hospital. They had already spoken with them, and they were trying to figure out if they were going to send an ECMO machine, which is this giant life support thing that takes the blood out of your body, oxygenates it. They can do all kinds of really cool stuff with this thing. They were trying to decide if they were going to send that on an ambulance to him, or if they were going to life flight, I'm doing laundry, him to Duke. They decided it would actually be faster to life flight him to Duke. So by now, it's almost 7 o'clock. They rushed me down to the NICU in a wheelchair because I can't walk. So I can say goodbye. Because there wasn't a person there that thought he was going to make it. They thought he was going to die en route to Duke. It's an hour to prep the helicopter. And get it to the hospital. An hour. They made it in 30 minutes. Because by the time we got down to the NICU, and I got to sit there and stare at this perfect little boy that was purple and blue, and see him, there was a tap on my shoulder and the pilot standing behind me wanting me to sign papers. I pretty much put my son's life in their hands. And I'm signing him, and they're prepping his bassinet to move him onto the helicopter. And that was the last time I saw him until the next day. not the first time I was told to tell him goodbye. They left. They took me back to the room. They moved me to another room because women without babies didn't get to stay in the maternity wing. So not only did I lose my baby, but now I'm being moved to this other end of this hospital, into this teeny tiny room. It looked like a prison cell. I'm not kidding. And my midwife walks in and she goes, "I'm going to go ahead and discharge you if you want to go home." She goes, "Because there's no reason to keep you. The only reason why we keep you is so we can keep an eye on baby, not you." She says, "You only have to stay 12 hours. It's not quite been 12 hours, but we're going to go ahead and send you home because we know you're going to go to Duke." So, I'm in the process of all this. I've had to call my roommate because she was on her way to Greenville with my daughter and her car broke down. My brother and my dad had picked her up and they had dropped her off, and then I had called my mom and my dad and gave them an update on this, and I had to update my husband on this because he was in the fucking shower, and not that I blame him for that, he was taking a shower. And then we didn't go to Duke. We went home. Hey, Floofit. Move, buddy. I was angry at him for that. I don't ever think he'll ever realize how angry I was at him for that. But, Floof, what did you do? Cats. Move your butt. But, he had been up since 4 in the morning, so he wanted some sleep. But at the same time, I just pushed baby out of me, and I wanted to go see him. Because nobody knew if he was going to live or die. Well, by this point in time, by the time we get all discharged, by the time we drive almost an hour home, because we are not having this baby in our hometown, which is another story. I'm missing a sock, of course. But, he laid down. Duke calls him and tells them they had already prepped him for surgery. They're getting ready to hook him up to ECMO. And they needed us to be there. So, apparently both of us forgot to tell my roommate that we were leaving her with the girl child again. Oops. I actually ended up having to call her and tell her, "Oh, by the way, we had to leave." She was cool. I love our Iz. She's awesome. There is something on my shirt. Oh, that's the junkie shirt anyways. We drive the hour and 45 minutes to Duke Hospital. This place is pretty much empty because at this point in time it's late. I don't even know how late it was. I really don't. It was a long day. I know his surgery was about 10:30, 10:45. I know those details. I'm in a wheelchair because I couldn't walk still. I tried walking, ended up popping a stitch trying to walk across the causewalk, and yeah, that wasn't fun. We get to the NICU, and we're met not by a doctor, not by nurses. We're met by the head of the NICU unit. And she flat out tells me, I don't know what God you pray to, but you need to keep praying because he shouldn't be alive. This baby's not even 24 hours old yet, and he shouldn't be alive. Jamie, Christmas, I need to treat that with some stain stuff. Sorry. They go into all this. We've run every test possible. We've done everything we can. There's nothing we can do. You need to be prepared for a funeral. You need to call who you need to call because we can only keep him on ECMO for 3 days. So here I was, playing with the idea in my head that I needed to make sure that his big sister saw him because it was the only time she'd ever get to know her baby brother. That I needed to make sure my mom got to see him. Because she fought too hard to be here. She had already had cancer once. She had one. And we found out about a month after she was declared cancer-free that I was pregnant with him. So they put us up in this room, and my mom comes and my dad comes. And it's really fucking late at night. And everybody goes to sleep with me. And I can't sleep. Because my baby is in the other room dying. I don't know what's wrong with him. They can't find anything wrong with him. He is by every means absolutely perfect and normal. And just as I started to doze off, because they got me on some pretty heavy stuff, trying to make sure I'm okay, the doors fly open. And this hysterical NICU nurse starts screaming, "We found it! We found it, and he's gonna be okay." I got to talk to the echo technician, ultrasound technician, whatever you want to call him, the next day. Yeah, well, I guess it was the same day because it was about 2 a.m. when he came running in the room. And she said her hand was... Hang on. Sorry, people. But she had said her hand was on the button of the ultrasound machine. And she was getting ready to turn it off because they were done. Completely and totally done. There's nothing they could do other than let him go. Well, she said just as she was getting ready to click the button, there was some sort of weird glitch in her screen. So she looked up at her screen, and she says she doesn't know how to explain it other than it looked like somebody put their hand inside his chest because you could see fingers and everything wrap around his heart and lift up his heart up against his rib cage. So they were able to see that the main artery that runs from his lungs to his heart, the artery that allows the oxygenated blood to travel around the body. That vein wasn't attached. It was exactly where it was supposed to be. It was perfectly formed. His heart was perfectly formed. The veins weren't attached to his heart. So he was breathing. His heart was working. Everything was doing what it was supposed to be doing. But the veins weren't attached to his heart. He even had a hole where they were supposed to be attached. Go figure. She said it was the damnedest thing she had ever seen. That somebody's hand reached into his body and pulled up his heart so they could see what was wrong. So that, of course, got everybody excited, because then they knew. So they very quickly started mapping his heart and everything else, so they would have a 3D image and could make a model and know the best way to treat this and fix it so that he'd have a chance. And it's still not better yet. We have a chance. A very, very scarily small chance. But a chance. And she had told me, doing her job, it's really easy to lose faith. It's really easy to be overcome by all the loss. That doesn't seem to have a rhyme or reason on why they lose babies and children. She said that there was absolutely no other way to explain this other than God. So that's the second time God was mentioned to me by somebody that pretty much didn't have faith anymore. So they move him out of NICU into a cardiac unit, because now they know what's wrong with him. He's no longer a NICU baby. He's a pediatric intensive care unit, cardiac intensive care unit. PICU. So they move him, and all his ECMO equipment that's about the size of a Volkswagen Bug all get moved down the hallway in this giant parade of craziness to the PICU. We have an idea. We know what comes next now. And everybody's there. Ex's pastor's there, mom's there, dad's there. And we're pretty much given the rundown on everything, because they know what's wrong. Fixing it's a different story. Seriously. To make matters worse, his lungs and his heart had so much damage to them, they didn't know if they would continue to function. So the decision was made to leave him on ECMO for as long as possible to attempt to give his body a chance. Because if they did surgery then, he was going to die. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He would die. Because he wasn't strong enough. Well, here's the downside to ECMO. The longest they had ever gone without an ECMO failure was 3 days. History of the hospital. Having ECMO. 3 days before they fail. When an ECMO machine fails, you're no longer getting oxygen. and they have less than 3 minutes to switch out the machines before you die. 3 minutes. On average, it takes 3 to 5 to switch out an ECMO machine. They had it down to a science, and 90% of the time, they could get it in under 3 minutes. But it was always a really scary thing. Chase went almost 5 days on a single ECMO machine without a failure. Almost 5 days. Before, it might have been 4. It's a long time ago. This was 8 years ago. Almost 9. They decided that it was better to go ahead and do the surgery at this point, rather than continue to chance that ECMO was going to fail. So they decided that they'd pushed their luck entirely too much. Children. But where was I? Surgery. They decided to do surgery, and talking to the doctors, pretty much, once again, told to tell him goodbye. There was a less than 26% chance that he would live through surgery. Okay. At this point, what do? You either damned if you do, you damned if you don't. And at least 26% was better than 0. So he goes into surgery, and we wait to hear, and we wait to hear, and we're not hearing anything, and I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, and we're surrounded by both sides of our family, and pastors there, and everybody's there, and there's no lonelier feeling than being surrounded by people and still feeling utterly alone. Nobody can do anything. Nobody can fix this. Nobody can help this. The only one that can fix this is God. If he lives, if he doesn't, that's not any of our decision. There's nothing you can do. This isn't a cold where you can get the medicine or Tylenol or a wet rag. This isn't, I fell down and scraped my knee and I need a band-aid. This is, if it doesn't work, you're burying your kid. And I've met a lot of parents who did. With less issues than what Chase had. So, I just had a baby. And I needed to go pump. And the cat's destroying things. So I leave everybody. And I go upstairs to the PICU and the NICU to go pump. And then on my way out, I run into Life Flight Pilot. Life Flight Pilot stops me. I don't know who the hell he is. I barely remember who took my kid. I barely remember somebody was there. But he stops me. He goes, "You're Super Baby's mom, right?" Yeah. And he says, "I need to tell you something." And he holds my hand. And he says, I had completely lost my faith in God until I met your son. God damn it. Another person talking about God. And here I am just... You don't have a choice but to trust him. You don't. So I smile. Try to smile. And he says, I completely lost my faith in God. I lost my faith in everything. He says, before this, I served in Afghanistan, and I became a life flight pilot. This is the only thing I knew how to do. Coming out of the military was fly helicopters. Cats. And he says, you see so much death. That you start to think God isn't real. He goes, war, you expect to see death. He says, but to see the amount of kids and people that never make it. Sorry, I'm looking for a sock. He says, it's so easy to lose your faith and lose your way. And he said, hang on. Okay. Making sure somebody else isn't coming into the bedroom again. But he said, life flight round trip takes a minimum of 2 hours from Duke to the hospital we were at. He says in 10 years, I want to say it's 10, of flying between those two hospitals, he has never had a life flight take less than 2 hours. And he says that was with a tailwind both ways. He said he made it to that hospital and back in under an hour. Under an hour. And then he started asking questions, and he said, because at this point in time, I really don't want to deal with anybody. My baby's in surgery. I just want to go back downstairs and sit in the lobby and mope and pray. But he said, why were you in Greenville? I noticed that's not your hometown. And I told him I had an absolutely horrific experience with my daughter, where they pretty much forced me to have a C-section. And then it caused all kinds of additional complications. Because I have a broken back. It's broken in 3 places. With a compromised spinal cord. I was told never to have an epidural or saddle block because it could injure the spinal cord and cause permanent issues and possibly put me in a wheelchair. Well, this hospital swore up and down they knew better than a bunch of neurologists, because obviously I wasn't in a wheelchair, therefore I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. And did one anyways, against my will, because the way this hospital worked, you signed the paperwork and they could pretty much do whatever the hell you wanted to, but they wouldn't let you be admitted until you signed the paperwork that said they could pretty much do whatever the hell they wanted to. All they needed was my husband to say, okay. He didn't even have to say it. Just nod his head yes, which he did. Because they had him worried. I wasn't worried yet. Water hadn't broken. She was fine. I was fine. Everybody's heart rate was normal. Everybody's blood pressure was normal. I was cool. We were all good. I was good for the long haul. But, you know, why run Pitocin? Because my contractions had stalled. Why break my water? Because my contractions had stalled. Go figure. Why let me get up and walk? Because my contractions had stalled. No, they wanted to do a C-section, but instead of listening to me that I needed to be sedated, they did a saddle block anyways. Well, saddle block hit my spinal cord, sent extreme pain down my back. I got screamed at because I jumped. Didn't have a choice. They hit my spinal cord. Doctor started cutting into me. Could feel every bit of it. I'm laying there screaming. My husband's not even in the room. The anesthesiologist had to jump up and stop him. Had to actually physically grab his hand and restrain him from continuing to cut into me. My blood pressure skyrocketed at that point in time because I was in that much pain, and I pretty much passed out. I don't remember anything for like the next, I don't even know how long. But their policy is once you've had a cesarean at that hospital, you will continue to have cesareans for every pregnancy afterwards. It was their policy when I got pregnant with my son. So I had decided that it was too dangerous for me to have another C-section done the way they want to do it without me being sedated. I refused to do that because it would put me in jeopardy and my kid in jeopardy, and that just, it wasn't worth the risk. But have you ever heard, and I don't remember what passage it is, somebody would know it, the Bible passage where God knew you before you were ever conceived in the womb? That's Chase. God knew before he was ever conceived in the womb. Because of the experience that I had at my home hospital, we went to Greenville, 45 minutes away from my home, for labor and delivery. Because of that decision, it saved his life, or contributed to saving his life. Because what that pilot told me next was, had he been dispatched to our hospital, they would have taken him to Greenville first because it's the closest hospital with a NICU. And that he never would have survived a second life flight. He said so many things had to add up for that little boy to be here that there was literally no other explanation than God himself had played a role in that little boy's life before he ever came into existence, before his sister ever came into existence. God knew. At that point in time, there's like this massive calm that washes over me. And I know everything's going to be okay. No matter what God determined would be my son's fate, everything was gonna be okay. So, he leaves. I go back now. And wait. Doctor finally comes out, pulls us aside to another room, and you always kind of think the worst. I think it's just a given at this point. He says, I don't know how to explain this. What? Okay. So, he said, looking for more socks. he goes into all the things that could go wrong, all the things that potentially could go wrong. So you're kind of expecting, okay, what went wrong? Um, Less than 26% chance that he would even survive through surgery. 60 to 80% chance that he would need to be on bypass machine for at least a week, if not longer. Like an 80% chance that they could sever a nerve that would prevent him from ever speaking or crying. A massive percent that, as small as his heart was, a suture would go where it wasn't supposed to go, and his heart would fail. A massive chance, and the percents were just ridiculous. Ridiculous numbers. That his heart and his lungs would never recover enough. There's something going on in the living room for him to go home. And he's going through all these stats again. And then he gets to the good part. Why can't we just skip to the good part? They were able to take him off the bypass machine and off of ECMO as soon as this last suture went into his heart. They didn't even have to restart it. It started on its own. With no issues. And his blood immediately began oxygenating itself. He never had to go on bypass, except for the surgery itself, which is normal for heart surgery. He didn't have to go back on ECMO to oxygenate his blood. They did put him on a trach, trying to give his lungs a little bit of help, because they were so severely damaged. They didn't think he'd ever breathe on his own. And they took him back to PICU and said that as soon as he was settled in, we could go see him again. And they forewarned us when we got to his room. His chest was open to allow for swelling of his heart. So there was a plastic plate on top of his heart, and it can be kind of intimidating, kind of scary for some people. I didn't care. He was alive. But that doctor, before everything was said and done, when we were back in the room and he had come back by and checked on him, he said, "You can't deny God is real when there's no reason he should be here." I don't know if anybody's actually done the math yet, but he was born at 9:30 a.m. July 11th. At 9:40, his umbilical cord was cut, which meant he was no longer being supplied oxygen. And the really weirdest thing about this, the whole umbilical cord being really, really long, but his placenta was actually still attached to me, and we had to do some major stuff to actually birth that as well. I know that's kind of gross, sorry. Which meant that I was still full on providing oxygen for him up until the moment of time in which his umbilical cord was cut. God has a plan. Hey, Marshmallow. But it was a little before 11 before he was put on 11 at night, not in the afternoon. Morning, however you want to say it. It was 11 p.m. before he was put on ECMO, where his blood was being oxygenated. Do the math. 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, 10:30. Even if you go only to 10:30, that's 13 plus hours without oxygen. $13 without oxygen. I know some of you should really be asking the question, and that's not possible. 13 hours without oxygen. And his oxygen levels when he left Greenville were 32%. If you need to go look it up, go look it up. But that's not possible to do without brain damage. And I'm not talking a little bit of brain damage, I'm talking the brain damage you don't get up from. Well, this little boy continued to fight the odds. And he continued to find people's faith. People in the living room keep distracting me. In less than a week, they closed his chest. And they won't take you off of a ventilator until your chest is closed. It was actually only a few days. Wasn't even 2 weeks old yet when they closed his chest. And kids have the neighbors over, apparently. And then a few days later, he came off the ventilator. And then they moved him into another room with a bunch of other babies. And then they moved him to floor, which is where the regular pediatrics go. And in this process, they start teaching you infant CPR and how to use a feeding tube and how to take care of the stitches on his chest and how to bathe him, because you can't bathe him like a normal baby. And all the meds that you're gonna have to deal with. And everything else. And I finally had a doctor get mad at the nurses and tell them, yeah, how are you going to know if he's going to be able to eat if you don't try to feed him? So we finally gave him a bottle, and they were like, but the babies on ECMO can't normally take a bottle. It takes them forever. So they have to be tube fed. He took the first bottle and drank it like he was starving. Just keep proving me wrong, little dude. Every single time they'd say he can't, he did. So we took out the feeding tube, and they wanted to make sure that he was drinking at least 4 ounces every feeding. And I couldn't breastfeed him because 1, his latch wasn't strong enough, and 2, they wanted to supplement him with extra calories because how hard his heart was working. His heart could beat up to 250 beats per minute. It set off every alarm in that place when he was screaming. But before they could discharge us, and he's a little over 3 weeks, not quite 4 now, Um, they sent us to go have a CT scan done of his brain because they needed a baseline after him being on ECMO to make sure there wasn't any brain bleeds or anything else from all the blood thinners and everything else going on. And here I am holding my baby. And it was almost 2 weeks before I could hold him for the first time. Actually, well, about a week and a half. And I'm holding my baby, and we got him dressed and ready to go, and we're all packed up. And, of course, husband's still not there. He had gone to his dad's house with, girl child. And a bunch of freaking interns walks in, and they start reading off his chart and talking about his brain damage. I hadn't been told he had brain damage yet. I hadn't been told any of this. So the neurologist grabs the chart out of their hands, shoves them out of the room, and closes the door. Thank God for some people. She sits down, because they were sitting there rattling off all the things he couldn't do. He'd never be able to take a bottle. Well, he could do that. He'd never be able to talk. He'd never be able to walk. He'd never go to school. He'd never make friends. He wouldn't be able to socialize. He wouldn't be able to potty train. Wouldn't be able to have a normal life. Wouldn't be able to feed himself. What gets thrown out? Sorry, people. But the list it went on and on. No school, no friends, no social life, no talking. We knew he could cry. He could cry for hours. Never be able to feed himself, never be able to crawl, never be able to walk, never be able to roll over. Never be able to hold things. And there was a possibility that he could be a psychopath. Yeah. And they're talking about my baby. Like he never would be. So, after she throws him out, she sits on the edge of my bed and she's talking to me and she's looking at him and messing with his hands and playing with his feet and watching him grab things and him make noises. She goes, "You can listen to all the things he can't, or you can work on all the things he can." And she said, "The mind is a remarkable thing that we do not fully understand." She said she would set us up with help to give him the best possible opportunities that he could for the rest of his life. And she already said, she goes, "We need to focus on what he can. Because if I had seen this before we took out the breathing tube, he never would have had the breathing tube removed. Because by all science and all explanation, he should not be able to breathe on his own. His brain damage was so extensive, it covered half of the right side of his brain and half of the left side of his brain so completely, all the way from the front of his head to the back of his head, that he, by all circumstances, should not be able to breathe. And here he was, breathing, eating, screaming at the top of his lungs. And we go home. And we deal with withdrawal symptoms and seizures. And 7-hour screaming fits that nobody has an explanation for. But he eats like a champ. And he cries at his sister. And he laughs at his sister. He learns to crawl, and he learns to roll over, and he learns to walk. And he learns to say words. And he learns to run. And the seizures stop. And he grows big. And he goes to kindergarten. And today, he is 8 years old. He's in the 3rd grade. And you'd never know there's anything wrong with him. His doctors have said he is healed so completely that if it wasn't for the fact that he was the one that did his surgery, he would have never have known he had surgery. We had a CT scan done before he started kindergarten, and the hospital called me a liar. And then had to see actual pictures of his original CT scan. And she apologized to me because she had never seen something like that. His brain damage was gone, all except for a quarter-sized spot over the cognitive and social aspects of his brain. So Chase doesn't always understand, like when he's playing with his friends, he understands the concept of hide and seek and tag, but the more people that you add into it, he starts not understanding what's going on. Same game, just more people. He doesn't comprehend it. He gets really frustrated with it and really upset. He can get overwhelmed if there's too much going on. He just can't quite process it. So he'll start kind of acting withdrawn. He'll like request to go home or to stop doing whatever he's doing. He's learned to ask for a break. That's his coping skills. I need a break. I'm done. Sometimes when he's gone past his threshold of limitation of tolerance for stuff, he'll break down and start crying. Just because he's just so overwhelmed, he just can't handle it anymore. And that's all just remnants of the brain damage where he doesn't, his brain, while it functions, doesn't function exactly like everybody else's. So it processes things a little bit differently. It takes him a little bit longer to read things, but he still reads it. He still comprehends it, but sometimes it takes him a little longer to comprehend it. Certain emotions get him mixed up sometimes. Like being upset and being angry. But honestly, we all do that sometimes. Sometimes he can only stand to eat certain flavors or textures for so long before he has to stop eating them. And he'll tell you he's hungry, not hungry, but he'll tell you he's full, but he's not full. He can't eat anymore of that thing because he can't stand that flavor anymore or that texture anymore. That was a really hard concept to get through to in-laws, and they still really don't get it. A lot of people don't. It's not necessarily that he's full, it's that he can't stand that flavor anymore. Think of it like If you've ever had something really, really spicy, you can only eat so much of it before you can't stand that spicy anymore. Doesn't mean you're not hungry, it means you can't eat that anymore. You just need a break from that and eat something else. It's the same thing for him, but it's certain bold flavors. Sometimes he's cool with chicken, sometimes he's not cool with chicken. It just depends on how done or overdone it is. It changes the texture, and he can't stand it. It's the weirdest thing. It's not that he's picky, he literally can't stand it. He will start gagging and throw up. And we literally can't have that. He weirdly sounds like he has a New York accent. Sometimes it's like a Southern accent, sometimes it's a New York accent. We don't know. It's the damnedest thing. He has problems with body awareness, like where you are in space compared to other objects. He'll like run into a counter. Yeah. For the longest time, if he was hurt, it would take a while before he realized he was hurt. He's doing much better with that. As his brain's developed and other things have come into perspective. Still waiting on the body awareness thing. He'll trip over his own feet. Body awareness. When he's writing, he has a really hard time with writing because what he's thinking doesn't always make it to his fingers, if that makes any kind of sense. So where everybody else in 3rd grade is writing like a 3rd grader, he still writes like he's like kindergarten, 1st grade. Honestly, I tell everybody all the time, these little things, these little quirks, they're nothing. He's the kid that shouldn't be. So these things are literally nothing. But Chase, for all intents and purposes, is pretty much perfect. He's a normal little boy. He was outside running around playing with the neighbors. He'll get overwhelmed, get upset, come inside, cry. And I'll tell him, buddy, you just need to chill. This is part of playing with friends. We gotta learn how to play with friends. We need to use our communication skills. We send him back outside. Very rarely that we actually side with him when he gets upset about something, unless it's obviously something where he's in the right. It's more of having to teach him to communicate what's going on with him, because even though he looks normal, there's still some things. So trying to get him to learn to communicate and tell others what he needs so that he can chill and go back to what he's doing, because half the time it's just because he got overwhelmed with something and he needs to process it and then go back to playing. He's made some amazing friends in his school, who they know Chase has heart problems. They don't know what's all wrong with Chase, but they know Chase is different, because they spend way too much time with him to not know he's different. Plus, most of these kids he went to school with starting in kindergarten. So, they've kind of learned to actually help him when he's become overwhelmed, which is just awesome. And we love it. But God is great. And Chase is here. And we've made some great friends along the way. We've met friends who have had less complicated heart repairs than what he had, whose children didn't make it. Sometimes that's hard, where you can't understand and you can't have an explanation for why God saved your kid and not somebody else's. There used to be a lot of guilt there, but there's not anymore. I've had some amazing women and mothers in my life that even after losing their own kids were there for mine and me. And there's no way to explain any of it other than God has a purpose. We may not know what it is, but he has a purpose and a plan. And that little boy is proof. And he saved a lot of people. In ways that we can only begin to understand. I think the hardest part about all of this weirdly hasn't been him. That first night when he was born, my mom sat in that hospital room with me and told me she would do cancer all again if it meant saving him. Yeah, Mom. There's nothing that'll make you feel more guilty than this weird guilt of, oh, I got pregnant with the first baby and mom got diagnosed with cancer. And then I had the second baby who should have died. But Mom died. September 31st, 2015. My mom passed away from stage 4 colon cancer. An extremely rare form of colon cancer. Not genetic, or so they keep telling us. As well as uterine cancer. Completely separate cancer. All of a sudden showed up because of the chemotherapy she was on. Her greatest wish was, one, that he would live, and 2 was that she would get to see first birthdays, because my sister-in-law was pregnant at the same time I was. Go figure. And him and his cousin are exactly a month apart. Well, right about a month apart. His birthday is August 7th. So we'd been home a week, and my nephew was born. 3 days after that, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. Chase lives with the moniker Super Baby. He doesn't really understand why he will at some point. Because he was Super Baby. And one of his favorite photos, and I don't know how he remembers that, is my mom holding his fingers, walking him around the living room, and wearing a Superman outfit. Wasn't even a year old. And she's got her chemo pump. And they're both just as happy as can be. You know, I know it doesn't work that way. But you can't. God doesn't exchange one life for another. He really doesn't. But honestly, Mom would not have wanted to live through what's going on in this day and age. And I don't know what God has planned for tomorrow. I don't know what that boy's future is. But I have faith. Whatever is going on right now, God has a plan. No matter how dark it seems, no matter how bad it gets, He's got this. And we just have to make it through it. And when somebody says you can't, you better damn well do what that little boy did and prove them wrong. When somebody puts limitations on you and says that you'll never, who cares? You've got God. Bad stuff happens. Good stuff happens too. And that little boy, he's a walking, talking pain in my butt. miracle from God. And no matter how stupid things get right now, and trust me, I've dealt with some stupid, nothing beats him. Alright, I've had enough. Laundry's folded, I need to put it away. Say hi to some kitties. Say hi, kitties. Kitty, kitty. You guys have a good day. Say your prayers. And know that you're never alone.